Next, I'd like to call upon one of our sponsors and one of the people I recently met not too long ago, but her and her team have just been absolutely instrumental in the success of this region and where things are headed from a future perspective as well. And they're one of the sponsors for this event today, so I'd like to thank Meta for their sponsorship. And also I'd like to thank Henrico Economic Development Authority, QTS, DKIX, and of course Synoglobix, who is the media partner from a publication standpoint, and the consultancy as well. With that, I'd like to invite on stage Kelly McCall from Meta to introduce our next panel. Kelly.
Good morning. I'm Kelly McCall. I'm the Regional Community Development Manager for Meta's Eastern Region data centers, including the one right here in Henrico County. It's a pleasure to be with all of you this morning. At Meta, we give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. And our data centers make that mission possible by enabling billions of people every day to connect to our technologies. Just by show of hands, how many of you in the room are connected to one or more of our technologies? That includes Facebook, Messenger, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Oculus. Excellent. Almost everyone. That's incredible. We are proud to be part of the growing internet ecosystem at White Oak Technology Park. We're really proud to contribute to the economic vitality of Henrico County. I'm thrilled to be here this morning and also to introduce this morning's keynote panel. This morning's keynote panel covers the rapidly evolving global internet infrastructure landscape. We'll hear from industry leaders about digital infrastructure developments in parts of the world including Jakarta, Mumbai, Sydney, Melbourne, Hong Kong, Ireland, the UK, Denmark, Guam, Singapore, Africa, and other potential global internet hubs. I'd like to now call upon the esteemed speakers of this panel who are visiting from faraway places. Panelists, if you could please take the stage as I call your name. First, from Hong Kong, Raymond Tong, CEO of Sun-E Vision. Next, joining us from the UK, Nigel Bailiff, CEO of Aquacoms. Joining us from Nigeria, Johnson Agobua, CEO of Kasi Data Centers. Eric Kontag, former executive chairman of GlobeNet, vice president of Suboptic, and trustee of the Suboptic Foundation. And finally, today's moderator, Vinay Nagpal, president of Interglobix and executive director and founding member of the IEIC. Vinay, over to you.
Good morning once again. Thank you, Kelly. Thanks so much for that introduction and for the sponsorship. It's a great honor for me again to welcome our esteemed panelists for our keynote panel today, which is on the rapidly evolving global internet infrastructure landscape. I think, as we all know, I think there's not a single part of the world that's not being developed when it comes to internet infrastructure. There's rapid development happening in various parts of the world across all continents, and it gives me immense pleasure and honor to welcome our panelists who are here from various different parts of the world. They're companies that are involved in projects which span multiple facets of the digital infrastructure industry, ranging from data centers, subsea cables, more subsea cables, and more subsea cables. That's all for you, Nigel. And network connectivity, global networks. So what I'd like to do is to kick off the panel, I'd like to have all the panelists give a quick introduction about themselves, their companies, and the role they play in the digital infrastructure and which region of the world. And yes, Eric, we'll start with you.
So thank you very much. For many years, I was the chairman of GlobeNet, a subsea cable system that connects the United States with mainly Latin America. And more recently, I'm spending my time with the Suboptic Foundation and Association, which is a trade organization that represents global subsea networks. One of the topics that I'm very, very passionate about has to do with one of the points that Vint mentioned earlier, which is education. And I think we are going through a phase of not having enough young people join our industry. We need to create the environment to attract the young, because they need to become the next generation of successors that keeps the internet running.
Yeah, that's very well said, and I think we have a panel discussion later where we talk about some of the programs which now are ranging all the way to a master's degree program that was recently launched specific to data centers, so we'll hear more on that. And you're absolutely right. I think as we look forward to, the infrastructure that we're all working on is got implications for generations to come, but at the same time, we have to be mindful from an industry perspective to make sure that we are doing what we can in terms of ensuring that the talent base, the workforce is developed in a way to be part of that industry going forward. Johnson, over to you.
Thank you, Vinay. I flew in from Lagos, Nigeria, so it's a pleasure to be with all of you, although my house is still here in Northern Virginia, in Fairfax. So I was listening to Vint, and it's amazing because in the days of UUNet and Internet MCI, we took particular care of the internet. And one of the more memorable times was packing up with some of my colleagues to go to Vint's office and sit with his colleagues to offload the May East and May West, because the two companies combined were melting down the internet peering point, and we needed to take good care of it. Hence the direct connect. So his team picked 2DS3s. For some of you that do not go that far back, it's a measly 45 megabits per second. And our team picked two others, hence Direct Connect, all in offloading the maize and the NAPs so that the internet can actually behave well. Those are the responsibilities we took upon ourselves to make sure that it ran well. So I've been quite fortunate to operate across three major markets. North America and global infrastructure, most recently in India, in helping with geo, early design, and now in Africa. I think of all of these three, I think Africa is the most important to me, and it's the most, should be the most important to all of us because of 1.4 billion people.
Well, that's where exactly the next billion people in terms of internet users are going to come from Africa. And yes, Johnson, you may have a house in Fairfax, and you're still very much now classified as coming from Lagos, because every time I talk to you, either you're in Nigeria or you're going to Nigeria or you're coming back from Nigeria. So kudos to you for your perseverance in the project you have underway, and best wishes to Cassie Data Centers. Subsea cables, and subsea cables. If there's anything I know about subsea cables, he's the person who I've learned it from, and I will say it very openly and admit it. Nigel Bailiff, over to you.
Thanks, Vinay. Yeah, I was born at an early age and went straight into subsea cables, but the first subsea cable I got involved with was in 1987, when I was 22 years old, and I've maintained the mentality of a 22-year-old ever since, and the excitement for taking connectivity to countries that have never had connectivity before. I built cables to 40 countries over my career. I've worked on the construction side, I've worked on the operator side, I worked for a little-known company called Cable & Wireless that some of you remember. It used to be up the road in Reston, in Herndon. So I don't have a house in Fairfax, but I've been to Fairfax many times over the years. For me, it's a fascinating combination of technology. So I'm an engineer by education, of politics, of cultures, of science, and particularly ocean science. But predominantly, it's about people. It's about connecting people across the world for all kinds of different purposes. You know, nothing moves without these major connectivity pieces that are unknown, that are buried under the sea, that nobody knows about, and everybody assumes that it's just satellite or something to the nearest radio tower. So I've had a fascinating, long career in this business. The company I run now, Aquacoms, we started only 7 years ago. We built a cable across the Atlantic, which at the time was the busiest and effectively the worst market in the world. It was oversupplied, and it's very quickly switched around to being a less supplied market. So we built a cable into Ireland from Long Island, and from then we've grown that company to 3 cables across the Atlantic now, a cable going down to India, where we partner with all of the people in the room, with Google, with Meta, to deliver these capacities in a neutral way. So we're kind of a poster child of the internet, because everything we do is neutral. We just want to land on a beach and give people access to these huge volume capacities that can connect them to other parts of the world, to use the peering that you guys set up over time. So we're on a strategy. We're owned by a digital infrastructure trust, a trust fund, which takes, it's looking at the internet infrastructure now in a more sensible way. It's looking at it as a 20 to 30 year lifetime platform investment to create yield for a different type of finance. We've been through many financing models. We all know about the dot-com boom and bust and what happens when you overheat the market, and particularly in the Atlantic. So lot of learning, but still fascinatingly exciting. My day ranges from talking about microscopic snails in seagrass off the coast of Marseille through to what's happening with geopolitical issues between Asia and the rest of the world. So it's fun. It's always been fun, and I hope it continues to be.
Exactly. Hope it continues to be, Nigel, and more power to you. Thank you for being here. Usually I carry my props. I have this subsea cable that I carry with me, but with Nigel, I don't take it out, because anytime I try to do that, he opens his pockets and he's got cables I've never seen. I've been on numerous calls with him, so where I try to kind of show him the sample of a cable, he turns around and picks up cables, which he'll even show me a sample of the first subsea cable ever installed, and then I have to be quiet, and so I've stopped doing that now.
Now you can't travel with those. I'm on a watch list for some strange pieces of metal in my luggage, so I don't carry them anymore.
Yeah, I hear you. Then we have Raymond Tong, who's traveled here from Hong Kong. I was introduced to Raymond not too long ago by Dean Nelson, who is, I call him the natural connector of the industry. And I've had the fortune of getting to know Raymond and learn about Raymond and his company and his passion really for data center and subsea convergence, which resonated with me to the point 4.5 years ago when I founded Interglobix. It was on that one single mission, which is the convergence of data centers and subsea. Raymond, over to you.
Yes, thank you. It's great to be here today. Great to be in Virginia. I flew in from Hong Kong yesterday. So I think data come in faster than my flight, which was 16 hours. My company, Sunny Vision, is the largest data center operator in Hong Kong. We own the connectivity hub in Hong Kong and in Asia called Mega I. Maybe a lot of the network people here knows about Mega I. It's a single building that was started 20 years ago by my major shareholder, Sun Hung Kai, who is a real estate developer in Hong Kong. And they look at that industrial building, and with internet starting, my chairman said that, hey, why don't we just convert the industrial building floor by floor for hosting IT equipment? And eventually, there are 11 subsea cable landing into Hong Kong, and 9 of them terminate in Mega I. So it's a single building with 15,000 cross connect, and we are growing. With the pandemic hitting Hong Kong and the rest of the world, we are seeing the traffic surge and also a lot more interconnection connectivity activities. Apart from the interconnect business, we also build purpose-built hyperscale data centers for clouds, whether from the US or from China or from the region. So we take a two-pronged approach. And then 2 years ago, we realized that subsea cable have difficulty landing in Hong Kong because although Hong Kong is a coastal city, but by talking to a lot of subsea cable guys, they were saying that, hey, your government actually deem all the coastal areas as a coastal protection area. So it's really, really hard for any cable to land. As a result, we took the initiative to buy a piece of land on the coastal area and south side of Hong Kong Island. And yet last year, we launched a carrier-neutral cable landing station. And we already confirmed a regional cable landing with us, and a few more are talking to us. So I think it's an open cable landing station that anyone can use, and it can terminate in any data center. It doesn't matter. But we are trying to make Hong Kong competitive in this regard. So for your next cable coming in town, let me know. We'll help you land.
I've had cables in Mega Eye for 22 years.
Thank you.
Before you know it, Raymond, you'll get that call. I think it's fascinating when you think about subsea cables in terms of what these cables are capable of doing in terms of the amount of traffic that traverses through them. And on a daily basis, I think upwards of $10 trillion of transaction happens across these cables. There are upwards of 538 cables and 1,426 cable landing stations around the world globally. Eric, for the audience here, let's take a quick regional perspective. And you've been involved with subsea cables, obviously, for a better part of your career. But in terms of Virginia specifically, you've had projects underway and involvement and engagement even sort of prior to the first subsea cable landing. Give us that perspective, and how have you seen the landscape of Virginia change over these last short 5 to 6 years?
Sure. So the system that I ran landed in Florida and then New York. And at the time, many of the subsea cables that were built to connect people or to connect networks. And one of the changes that we've seen over the last several years, in particular, as the hyperscalers, Facebook and Google jumped into the space, is they wanted to connect data centers. The amount of traffic that they have was significantly larger than what we had seen before. And so therefore, you need to sit down, you need to start looking at the geography and say, are these existing hubs the right ones to connect, let's say, to these new players? And the answer is no. So you had to do it backwards. So where are these facilities? And so if you go back, let's say, some 10 years, you started to see Google developing their data centers in North Carolina and Amazon putting theirs up in South Carolina. And of course, you have Data Center Alley up in Northern Virginia. But none of the systems really gets close enough to those facilities because traditionally, they all landed in the New York coast or the Miami coast, with very few, let's say, being on the eastern seaboard of the United States for different reasons. So just by looking at the map, you say, wow, wouldn't it not be great if a system could land right here? And Virginia Beach happened to be that area. So over the years, we started talking to system developers, and we said, can we do it? You've got, of course, the U.S. Navy in the vicinity. You've got a lot of submarine activity. Can we build a corridor to land systems? And then the idea started to resonate. Eventually, Microsoft and Facebook at the time said, this makes sense to us, and they promoted a cable called Marea, now jointly owned with Telxus, and they built the Virginia Beach to Spain cable, lands in Bilbao. And so you had, for the first time, a direct connection between Europe and the United States with a different, diverse landing. And that was the time that all of a sudden Virginia and Virginia Beach were open for international business, direct international business. Other systems followed. Telxus built another cable called BRUSA, Brazil-USA cable, that basically goes straight down south from Virginia Beach until it reaches Sao Paulo. And again, it provides diversity. So when you're looking at the landscape, and this happens globally, you want to say, who do you need to reach? Where do you want to get to, right? And today you have a combination of players. So you're going for the data centers, but you're also going for those hubs that allow you to connect networks. And finding those destinations is important. That's how Virginia Beach all of a sudden got on the radar, and that led to the building of landing stations, data centers, let's say, another infrastructure?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right in terms of all of a sudden. I mean, at the time, I was with DuPont Fabros Technology, my previous company, and I was supporting Microsoft and Facebook both as our key clients on the data center side. And when the whole idea of subsea cable, coming in a diverse location came about, as Eric said, unfortunately, it was because of Hurricane Sandy that had affected Long Island and New York. So that's what really led to it. But in terms of opportunities, right? I mean, with the subsea cable landing in Virginia Beach, and then subsequent to that, I had the fortune of working with QTS in co-founding the NAP, or we will not taking a nap here, Vin, thank you. I didn't think of it that way before. As a network access point, which is so critical when you look at it, not just, so obviously from a QTS perspective as a major data center operator, from a region perspective, because that's what becomes the genesis of different networks, different even enterprises to come and connect with each other. Oh, and yes, by the way, you still have the subsea cables landing in Virginia Beach, but in Sandston, which is like roughly around 9 miles away, you have the NAP established, which is where now we have internet exchange points developed, and but the terrestrial fiber is important as well. I see Gary Tarpley there in the back. Companies like Gary's Metro Fiber Networks play a key role in providing that transport, providing that rich, high count dark fiber, which connects the beach location to the NAP, which is extremely critical. Johnson, when we were talking earlier about CASI data centers, CASI cloud, CASI foundation, I think there's one message I heard from you, which was very clear to me, that as the founder, as the CEO, for you, the subsea cable and the value proposition is so strategic that you're planning your sites in Nigeria and other places in Africa around the subsea cables. Share with us, what do you see as that value proposition of the convergence between data centers and subsea?
It's absolutely important that the sources and the sink of internet traffic have minimal latency to the sea, because you need to be able to bring the world to Africa, as I always say, and bring Africa to the world. So if a lot of the content and the applications and the platform will be developed at scale, you need to make sure that the subsea cables have absolutely no obstruction getting to those data centers. So for CASI, our goal is to build sustainably large hyperscale data centers and interconnection facility across Africa, starting in Nigeria. And for that to work, we need to be in close proximity to all the subsea cables. In Lagos, we took over 10 acres of land in prime area where all the subseas land, and we are less than 1 kilometer from the beach, and less than 2 kilometers from one of the most reliable power sources. And that's important, and that's just in Lagos, the largest economy in Nigeria, the 7th largest in Africa. And then we didn't stop there. So all the cable systems that land in a country over 220 million people, that's really the hub of over 500 million people in West Africa, land within a stretch of 20 kilometers. And we said that, is not sustainable. So when we started CASI, we said we're going to locate in the south-south portion of Nigeria. We're going to do everything possible to work with the states in that region to be able to terminate as many cables as possible in truly open format. So again, we took out quite a few acreage, again, next to the sea, and to deploy. So for us, if you think about it, right, to address 1.4 billion people in Nigeria, 220 million people, you really need to go from the beach all the way to the population centers. And you have to first solve the problem of landing successfully in the beach, being able to terminate all the traffic there, and then being able to take them inland, and along the way create economic opportunities for the entire value chain. I'm really glad that Vint spent some time talking about it. We talk bits and bytes, we talk tech, we talk building, we don't really talk about the value chain and how we empower the communities along the way. And that's one of the focus, and I hope I can come back to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's the value chain, and keeping that focus is so important, Johnson, because, to build, one is to build a sustainable business. Second is for that infrastructure to make an impact across industries. It has to be scalable, it has to be resilient, it has to be highly connected. And I think to go in early on with that proactive approach of subsea data center convergence is such a phenomenal win-win situation. I mean, and Eric, you and I have had this conversation multiple times in terms of what that convergence looked like. Is there a magic wand that works in one region and we can deploy it everywhere? The answer is no. There are nuances related to certain geography, certain infrastructure that's there. And speaking of infrastructure, Nigel, D9 infrastructure, I mean, share with us, I mean, I would still call it relatively new. I remember the first time when you said, I sold my company on Zoom, and by the way, I don't know if it's public or not for how much you sold it for. I'll let you share that story. But that's a classic story, in terms of what Nigel has accomplished with Aquacomms, and now with D9, which is part of Triple Point, the data center and subsea convergence. So, Nigel?
Yes, yeah, that was the headline. We sold the company on Zoom, but throughout in April of 2021, we IPO'd the fund, which is it's a closed infrastructure trust fund based out of Jersey. We call it Old Jersey, not New Jersey, the island Jersey in the Channel Islands of the UK. It's a tax-free host for investment companies. That D9 infrastructure, actually, the 9 comes from the UN Sustainability Goal number 9. So creating affordable and sustainable infrastructure for the world. It's a bedrock approach company looking at investing in the bedrock elements of the internet. So we have Aquacomms, which forms the subsea connectivity pillar. We have Verne Global Data Centers, which is based in Iceland, who form the pillar around DCs. But these are a lot of conversation about data centers. Us in the room probably a little bit more informed than the rest of the world, but people see a data center, a data center, a data center, a data center. What we invest in is high-performance computing fed by sustainable energy in cold, dark places in the world. So all of our investments are in the north of Scandinavia, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and they are high compute. They're 11 months of the year free air cooling. They've got a model to them, and then the connectivity of our infrastructure will bring compute requirements to that sort of core calculation engine, if you like, in northern Scandinavia. So when we build a cable, like we have a cable going live to India in about 18 months' time, we'll have connectivity into downtown, the middle of Mumbai, where we can take data up to Scandinavia and maybe compute a weather model, a fantastically complex mathematical model that doesn't need to be computed in a hot place in the middle of Mumbai where the electricity cost is dramatically higher and probably delivered by fossil fuel. So that's the ethos for the fund. We also have radio and small cell investments in some of those technologies to look at the very bedrock. And the bedrock, it's an important phrase, I think, because some of the models of the technical side of our industry, like the ISO layered model, there's assumption made in that model, and the assumption is that the layer below you will always be there. Well, the layer below you will always be there if it's properly organized, properly designed, and properly constructed. The submarine cable layer of that in the globe is a lot thinner and a lot less resilient than people really realize. There haven't been any major disasters, but some of the things that have happened in the last few years have helped to spread that out and create the resiliency. Virginia Beach, going further down Myrtle Beach, going further down Jacksonville, Miami, going up, you've got New Jersey, Long Island, which was always traditionally a landing zone, Providence, and then all the way up to Canada to the Hibernia cables that land up there in Halifax. So that's created a diversity, and the phrase "it takes a village to make a child," actually it takes a mesh to make a network. That's the really important thing in what we're doing to construct these cables, not always to the optimal place for latency, actually. Because if everybody goes to the optimal place for latency, we're all too close together, and there are events that can cause, even natural events, there's obviously geothermal and seismic events, but very, very simple, boring things. There were 3 cables cut off the coast of Cornwall because of a $10 shackle failing on a Norwegian ship. So this ship in the middle of the night is going empty from Holland all the way through to Ireland to pick up a cargo. This $10 shackle broke on the anchor. It was dogging the anchor into the vessel. The anchor deployed. The guy, the sleepy, able seaman on the bridge, rubbing his eyes, looking at the radar. Oh, we're slowing down a bit. I'll just give it some more revs. Puts the power up. The anchor's deployed to the seabed. It's buried itself about 8 feet below the surface of the sea. And as it goes around the corner of Cornwall, it goes ping, cuts the cable to Guernsey, ping, cuts the southern cable all the way to Manasquan, New Jersey, ping, cuts the next cable. It cut 3 cables before somebody spotted that it was the track of that vessel that was working around that corner that was causing these events. So that was 3 of the 8 cables that connect the UK to North America were cut because of a $10 anchor shackle. Not because of any kind of bad actors, not because of any huge seismic event, not because of any intentional event. So the infrastructure is a lot less resilient individually, but if we work together and we build it in the right way and we create the right mesh and we have a sensible view of how we deploy it, it can work in a very, very resilient way.
Yeah, well, I think not a single conversation goes by with Nigel without a new story, and a relevant one always. So that's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. Raymond, 80 megawatts to 200 megawatts, 14 subsea cables. I want to start off by asking you, as a CEO of the company, with a background, the company coming from a real estate perspective, what's more important for you, data centers or subsea?
Be careful.
Both are important because I guess in the Hong Kong environment it's a little unique due to the rare supply of real estate as it is a small city, but then in high demand. So as a result, any land parcel in Hong Kong are worth a fortune. But then I think we are one of the very rare asset class in real estate that can enjoy the benefit of riding with the technology growth because of the power density that the server racks keep on increasing. And then we are able to price the product based on $1 per kVA. I think that's the magical formula for my chairman. I mean, he's deep in his DNA, it's a real estate guy, right? Sun Hung Kai. I mean, he owns and built IFC in Hong Kong, ICC in Hong Kong, and Sun Hung Kai's market cap, it's one of the highest in the world in terms of developer. So at the beginning, he didn't realize what's the difference of building an IFC or a warehouse or a residential estate or a data center. What's the difference? But after we show that, hey, by building a data center, we keep on increasing the power density, and then the customers are actually very happy to use based on the power density. So I successfully established a formula for $1 per kilowatt into $1 per square foot, and justify that the big land parcel that we bought about 4 years ago in Hong Kong, its gross floor area 1.2 million square foot. It's going to be a 9-floor data center building, 1.2 million square foot, and we're going to pack in 180 megawatt into it. And it justified our business case to pay about $700 million US for that piece of land, and it will be launched next year. So very, very excited about it.
Yeah, I think it's a given that accretive value you add to the real estate when it comes to a data center by augmenting your connectivity services, let alone a subsea cable. I mean, if you have a robust interconnection platform, that in itself is quite an attractive value proposition to a data center operator in terms of the stickiness of the customer. But having a subsea cable, or 14 subsea cable in this case, is unprecedented for a region other than Marseille. And And we'll hear about Marseille later in the afternoon in another session. But I think it's just incredible, even if you look at from a region perspective. Maybe you can spend a minute, Raymond, talk about the region when we look at Southeast Asia. What are you seeing as some of the key drivers there? And by the way, I'm going to open it up for the audience for questions as well. So please get your questions prepared. We have a mic for the audience somewhere in the back. Thank you. So Raymond, if you can touch on the Southeast Asian region and what you're seeing there.
Yeah, it's a lot of activities. Basically, I think due to the geopolitical tension around the world, I guess alone actually cannot stop data growing and data traffic. So data need to find a way to make stopover. And as a result, after we launched the subsea cable landing station last year, initially there was going to be a Hong Kong to LA cable, PLCN, and then with branches to Taiwan and also to Philippines. But because of the geopolitical situation, it's not allowed to be light up. So the LA to Taiwan, LA to Philippines granted the approval to light up. But does the data stop because of that? No, it doesn't. I guess data will always find a way. Whenever I talk to some of the investors, ask us, so is Hong Kong doomed? We're like, I don't think so, because Hong Kong, it's geographically a center part of Asia. I mean, going up to North Asia, going down to Southeast Asia, it's within 100 millisecond round trip, data traffic, data speed. So all these deem it to be a viable and also a good market for network. But the geopolitical situation just make it a little bit inefficient. But having said that, regional cable taking advantage of the situation to accelerate their plan. We are seeing a number of Southeast Asia cables trying to accelerate to land their cable up to Hong Kong, and we are welcoming that. So yeah, and then also with China's major drive to One Belt, One Road, which is initiating Chinese corporates to go to other parts of Asia, and that's helping the other side of the traffic coming from Chinese enterprise coming to Hong Kong as a hub, and then go down to Southeast Asia. So we are seeing, good demand.
Yeah, and I think that development from a subsea cable and data center perspective is happening very, very rapidly. Let's see who's the brave one with the first question. I'll have to get up from my chair for that to make sure. There we go. Go ahead. Is that Gabe Cole? Oh my goodness. Welcome, Gabe. Thank you. I was like, yeah, that looks like Gabe Cole. I've not seen you in like a long time.
Great. Thanks, Vinay. This is for Raymond. I'm just curious, is one neutral landing station enough? Because most of my clients want two totally separate paths with complete diversity from the data center to the landing point. I think when we were here, I guess 3 years ago, we heard Facebook and Microsoft say they wanted 4 paths forward and 4 paths back. So I'm just wondering, is there efforts underway to do a second or third neutral landing station?
Yeah, indeed, effort that's on the way. I mean, we launched one carrier neutral cable landing station last year. It's getting a good response. And then subsequently, earlier this year, the government tendered out another small piece of land right next to our site. And of course, we bid for it aggressively, and then we won. So that site will be launched. We are under construction right now. That site will be launched in 2 to 3 years' time. In Hong Kong, building even a small house, that cable landing station, gross floor area, it's only about 22,000 square feet. So it's only like a townhouse on the street here in Richmond. But it takes us a couple years to build due to regulation. But to answer your question, we are indeed trying to make an effort, not just for our company, not just for Mega Eye, not just for our campus, but rather as a carrier neutral subsea cable landing station. We help you land. Of course, you pay a fee for that. But once you land, you can terminate anywhere within Hong Kong in other data centers as well. I think we try to make Hong Kong more competitive in that regard, trying to catch.
But I think Dave raises a good point that events like this are great because they bring the people together who have all of the parts of the puzzle. It's not just the building, it's not the approaches from the sea, it's not the backhaul fibers, it's not the power diversity, it's all of it together crafted into a beautiful solution that allows that resilience, the 4 paths, the 5 paths, however many paths are needed. And what we've seen in the last, say, decade is Europe was very much connected to New York, Long Island, a little bit of New Jersey from the southern part of England, and the advent of some of the bigger offtake requirements of Meta and Google and others have led to this super diversity. So now your landings are in Norway, Denmark, Ireland, UK, France, Spain, hugely spread out over the western seaboard of Europe, and the same on the eastern side of the US. You've got Halifax, Providence, Long Island, New Jersey, all the way down. So there's a really good gross layer of resilience, but that means that in the country, the I-95 corridor can't carry everything that joins it all together. So then what about the next layer of mesh? What about the buildings? What about the power supply for the buildings? How do you craft all of that? And that's where, events like this, where everyone comes together and there's a concentration of discussion about it is good.
And by the way, most of these lessons we need to carry into building infrastructure in Africa. I've spent quite a few nights on the Zoom call with Nigel talking about how do we actually create significant...
Did you sell your company? Did you sell your company to Nigel?
Say it again?
Did you
sell your company to Nigel?
Oh, not yet. Just talking about, creating diverse infrastructure in Africa. Simple constructs like landing far apart, sufficiently far apart, and then being able to backhaul the systems to proper data centers and being able to do it in a sustainable manner across routes that can be sustained. And these matter. And one of my key items is, as we build in Africa, we shouldn't have to learn the difficult lessons. We should really leapfrog into far more modern infrastructure. I call them just hyperscale infrastructure.
I've got 30 years of mistakes, I'll tell you about. But you've got to go beyond as well, just the telecoms piece, because, particularly around this coast and the coastline further north of here, coming onto the eastern seaboard, wind power generation. We have to be very careful there, and we have some real lessons in Holland, and we have some real lessons in the UK. If you build these enormous offshore wind farms, which are great, and they produce electricity in a more renewable fashion, you sterilize large swathes of the seabed to cables. And what you do is, if you're somewhere like Holland, you've done that all along your coast, and the only gaps are where the ports are, so where the ships go in and out. So that leaves the only place that you can put fiber optic telecommunications cables is the exact place you don't want to put it, which is near where the ships are. So you're creating a lessening resilience by how you're developing the seabed around a country. So there's a lot of long-term governmental negotiation needed around how to manage that, how to do what they call marine spatial planning and seabed planning. You've got protected areas for wildlife, you've got protected areas where wind farms are going, you've got military exercise areas. If you actually look at the chart, there aren't that many places that you can land down this seaboard. So there's a lot of negotiation and discussion with local government around how to get the optimum resilience for everybody.
Yep.
But there's another layer, if I may, Vinay. We're talking a lot about technology and cables and data centers and what have you. But in reality, it's the people that make these things happen, right? And in order for things to occur, like you were mentioning, Johnson, it's about the relationships that you have built over the years that generate the trust for people to say, you know what, I'm going to do business with you, or I'm going to partner with you. And you get that from being together in a place like this, right? You get that from being able to, dial up Nigel and say, hey, you had this issue before, let me learn about it. How do I avoid those mistakes, right? And I think exchanging that is super, super important, because it's all about the partnerships. You need to embrace the partnerships to make things happen. And not too long ago, you had data centers, you had terrestrial, you had subsea, and they were all different camps. And today that's coming closer and closer together. And I see all the way at the end of the audience back there some very young people. Yes, so I want to say thank you for being here, because you guys are the future of this industry. And I think the message to you is that this is a phenomenal industry to be in, because all the stuff that you guys do, your TikToks and using your cell phones and all that good stuff, would not exist if you don't have a very resilient network underneath. It's a combination of that subsea, the data center, the terrestrial stuff that allows us to have that internet. And so thank you for being here, and hopefully we'll excite you to stay in this industry, and you can pick this as a career. You'll be around like Nigel maybe several years from now.
You do not need grey hair to be in the subsea cable industry. It's a common misconception.
TikTok and YouTube shots that I've learned from my 7-year-old daughter. Who has the last question here for the audience? Then I'm going to do a quick wrap up. Let's see. Go ahead, Paul Rochelle from VCU.
Hi, good morning. Paul Rochelle with VCU. A quick question for each of the panelists, and you may want to just touch on one comment here. What do you track in order to predict your growth and where you add capacity? Is it the consumer-driven social media, the TikToks or so on? Are there business-to-business applications that are driving growth? What do you follow that helps you plan for the next 5 years out?
Follow the airline route.
I just look to see where Meta and Google are buying land.
That's really it. We aim to be the easy button for the hyperscalers, so we ask them.
Same here. I think for the hyperscaler, we talk to them on a regular basis have a portfolio of hyperscalers. So talk to each one of them on a regular basis to ensure that we have their latest forecast. But at the same time, from a connectivity point of view, tracking the newest application, tracking the upcoming unicorns, new sectors, AI, fintech, and all that to ensure that we are up to date for the connectivity piece.
But it goes a little bit further than that. I think for me, it's difficult, and it's also easy because there's nothing there. I was talking to one of the Henrico County executives earlier today, and Henrico County is in the process of delivering 500 megawatts are already up and running, right? Last 6 years, Africa is less than 300 megawatts, and Nigeria specifically less than 30 co-location space, so delivered. And so there's nothing, so it's mostly greenfield. And it goes further than just asking the hyperscalers. It's really partnering with them to begin the conversation with the various communities, be it states, be it nations, be it markets, to really begin the education that happened here in Henrico County. And I actually think the broader sponsorship, the broader conversation between states like Virginia State and Lagos State can really facilitate the lessons learned so that they can actually be able to leapfrog economic development. And besides the human capital availability in the market, this is really the biggest headache. How can that partnership exist? So I hope one of the items living here is for IEIC to really sponsor such activities. I think it's time to bring proper internet to Africa.
Thank you for that feedback, Johnson. That's one of the things Vint and I have been talking about in terms of from a future perspective. Eric, I know you want to add.
Yeah, so I just want to add one point to that. So when we think about that question and we think about some of the answers, we're thinking about the very, very big stuff. So we're mentioning hyperscale and whatever. But sometimes we forget, and if you look at the geography, what are all the towns and people and schools, universities that are along that path? And if you look at the United States, and you're in a place like Tennessee or Kentucky or Ohio or whatever. There's the big freeways, optical freeways in some cases, that go between major cities, but a lot of dark space in the middle, right? And there is a huge opportunity, actually, to build those off-ramps so you can reach those smaller communities. And one of the things that, for example, we have seen over the years in South America is when you bring communications to a community, over time, you will have sustained economical development. You need to have a lot of conditions there. But having internet, taking it to the schools, let's say focusing on reaching the tier 2, tier 3, tier cities enriches the entire region, and the entire region comes up. And I think we cannot forget about that. We tend to look at the very, very large stuff, the very large hyperscale deployments, but there's also a lot that needs to be done at a more granular level.
Yeah, we did a lot on technology to, if you like, piggyback on top of major pipeline-style routes of data flows between huge hyperscale locations, to add in technology, branching units that can send maybe some of the capacity to island nations that are along the way, or to nations that don't have such a rich connectivity. And we did a lot of work in South America with Suriname, Guyana, and places like that, where they had no direct connectivity to the internet. So it's a facilitating thing that can be done alongside some of the major pipes of huge capacity that are needed between the hyperscalers, because the technology is available and capable and deployable.
Yeah, and the moment I heard optical freeway, John Martin, your name came to mind when it comes to Global Internet Hub. And the initiative John has underway, by the way, as Nigel, you were talking about, is sort of looking at the mega region, looking at Virginia Beach, looking at Hampton Roads, looking at Williamsburg along the way, looking at Richmond, Henrico County as a sum total of what the mega region looks like. And also, amongst other things, they've done physical expansion of the highway as well, I-64. And this is the optical highway, John, so that's for you. The last question I have, if you can share your thoughts in 60 seconds or less, is what challenges do you see going forward for our industry when it comes to this convergence, and how we translate that into opportunities? We'll start with Raymond. We'll start the other way.
I guess for the market in Hong Kong, the major challenges that we try to resolve was the cable landing station a couple years ago, but that one is set. The next one, I guess for us, is that because of the power grids in Hong Kong are heavily regulated, is essentially monopolized. So a lot of our customers, for their sustainability needs, they ask about renewable energy, but because all our 6 data centers, 5 of them are with one power company called CLP, and another one is for Hong Kong Electric. So those geographical areas are basically exclusive power grid that we need to work closely with together with our customer, especially the hyperscalers, to push the power company to launch renewable solutions so that while we are growing, while there are a lot of megawatts are being used, we are using it in an environmentally friendly way. Right now, we are the only data center in Hong Kong that pay the power company for the renewable energy certificate, but that's like 50% higher markup. But we think it's actually worth it to make a statement, but it's not sustainable. So I guess that's one of the challenges that we are facing.
Thank you, Raymond. Thank you. Nigel?
It's two common things for me. One is talent, is getting people into this industry from an early age.
I hope you guys are listening carefully. Talent, we need more talent.
We've just done a graduate program. We're a small company, but we've really invested in a bunch of graduates who we want to drive through. I've had a 30-odd year career in this now, but there is a gap. Many people went into software and other types of network design. This is subsea is fairly unique because you're matching the sea to the technology to the geopolitics, and so bringing enough talent in, but also this geopolitical issue of seabed usage. There is a huge series of conflicts around oil, offshore wind, power cables crossing different oceans. So there's a big piece there that if we get it wrong, it'll be a problem and we won't know for 10 or 15 years, then it'll be a problem. So.
Absolutely. Johnson?
Yeah, it's just the sheer scale of the opportunity. Our vision of being the digital platform in Africa to connect the next billion is audacious. But if you're going to Africa, you have to think scale, just the sheer political nature of that continent. So the second one that's really important is impacting the communities positively, starting with the youth. Africa, as most of you know, has a fairly perfect pyramid distribution and population, and most of the young people need to be engaged. I think the biggest headache we have is just getting the talent. So what we did was to open up Kasi Academy. So we started training. And I know I blew up the 60 seconds, but the opportunity is large, just from tech to sustainably building platforms across that entire continent. I welcome all to come and really partner with us.
Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, I totally have to second that. I think, for me, talent definitely is number one, but education, let's say, is number two. And education, I'm not just referring of training the next generation of workforce. I'm also talking about, let's say, our governments getting educated on the importance of digital infrastructure. There are many deployments. I mean, even the United States, where new cities are being built, and they're not considering the need to build reliable infrastructure as part of those deployments. It's always an afterthought. They're not thinking of ducts. They're just, oh yeah, that's telephone. It's on a pole somewhere. No, it's not. I mean, we're talking about building resiliency into our infrastructure. And so the cities and the counties and the state governments need to understand the importance that digital infrastructure plays in the growth, in the future of our society. And so it's key to get them engaged very early on so that any new upgrades, any new planning includes infrastructure. It's just as important as water. And that doesn't happen yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's that collaboration, it's people coming together that's so key. Yes, we could go on all day with this fantastic panel here and all the speakers we have from different parts of the world, but we got to move on with the program. Please join me to give them a big round of applause. I just want to thank them once again for their support of IEIC, for their support of flying from different parts of the world. So thank you on behalf of everybody. Thank you for being here.